The wind blew softly across the empty stretch of prairie, carrying the smell of dust, pine, and the fading warmth of the afternoon sun. A long, quiet road cut through the golden grass, and on that lonely road stood a broken wagon. Its wheel lay half buried in the dirt, cracked down the middle like it had finally given up after miles of struggling through rough land, and beside it stood a woman alone, determined and tired. Her hands were covered in dirt, her dress smeared with streaks of dust, but she didn't stop working. She lifted the heavy log, dragged it closer, and tried to fit it into place, hoping the wagon would hold long enough for her to reach the next town. Every few seconds she paused, breathed deeply, and whispered something to her. Self-encouragement, maybe, or fear she didn't want to show. No one knew her name out there on the open plains. She was new to this part of the West, wandering with only a few belongings and a wagon that had seen better days. But she had a reason for traveling, a reason she kept secret, hidden beneath her calm face and quiet strength. Anyone passing by would think she was just another traveler trying to survive the harsh land. But she wasn't just surviving. She was running from something, or someone. The sun sat low on the horizon, stretching her shadow long and thin across the ground. She felt the sky changing, the day slipping into evening, and it made her move faster. Being alone out here at night was dangerous. The West was never a place you wanted to face in the dark, not when you didn't know who or what might come walking out of it. She pushed her hair back behind her ear and picked up another log, her hands shaking slightly from exhaustion. As she lifted it toward the wagon, she heard a faint sound in the distance. A horse. Slow footsteps in the dust. Steady. Like someone who wasn't in a rush but, also, wasn't turning back. Her heart skipped. She wasn't expecting anyone, and she didn't know if someone coming down this lonely road meant trouble or help. She slowly set the log down and wiped her hands on her dress, trying to look composed. Dust swirled lightly as the horse appeared over the small rise, carrying a lone rider, a cowboy. He rode with an ease that only someone familiar with this land could have. Tall in the saddle, hat pulled low to shade his eyes, wearing a long coat that moved with the wind. But there was something else about him, something quiet, heavy, almost haunted. He didn't look like a man searching for a place to go. He looked like a man searching for something he'd lost long ago. As he approached, the horse slowed on its own, as if sensing the tension around the broken wagon. The cowboy's eyes met hers for a brief moment. They were sharp, observant, and filled with a calm sadness that didn't match the sunset or the peaceful landscape. He took a breath, then spoke in a voice that sounded tired but gentle. Your wagon in trouble. She nodded, unsure if she should say more. The wheel broke. I've been trying to fix it before it gets dark. He looked at the sky, then back at her. You won't make it before nightfall like this. Her lips pressed together nervously. I don't have much choice. The cowboy dismounted quietly, almost too quietly, as if he didn't want to startle her. He tied the horse to a nearby post and walked over, each step slow and intentional. You traveling alone? He asked. She hesitated. That question was one she hoped no one would ask. Yes, she finally answered. Just me. The cowboy didn't show any reaction. If he found that stranger dangerous, he didn't say it. Instead, he crouched beside the broken wheel and examined the damage like he'd done this 100 times before. You need a new support beam, he said. This one's split clean through. She swallowed hard. I was trying to make one from the logs I found. You're strong, he said with a small hint of respect. But this wagon needs more than strength. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The prairie around them was quiet, except for the sound of wind pushing through the tall grass. The cowboy finally stood up and dusted off his gloves. I can help, he said simply. If you want. She looked at him carefully. A stranger offering help wasn't always a blessing in the West, but something in his voice, low, steady, honest, made her believe he wasn't the type to cause harm. Or maybe she was just hoping he wasn't. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded and started gathering the broken pieces of the wheel. She watched him work methodical, experienced, unbothered by the fading daylight. But what caught her attention wasn't how skilled he was. It was the look in his eyes every time he glanced toward the horizon. A look filled with worry. And fear. Not fear of her. Fear of something else. As the sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the ground, she noticed his hands trembling slightly when he touched the damaged wood. It wasn't from the cold. It was something deeper. Something he hadn't told her. She stepped closer. You okay? The cowboy paused for a moment, then forced a small smile. Yeah, just a long road behind me. His words didn't match his eyes. It was clear he wasn't just a traveler passing through. There was weight in his silence. A story he wasn't telling. A secret he carried like a shadow that refused to leave him. A secret that, though she didn't know it yet, would soon become the only thing standing between her life and the danger coming her way. He kept working on the wagon, but every few minutes, he lifted his head and scanned the horizon carefully, almost like he expected someone or something to appear. The land around them was empty. Too empty. The wind got colder as night approached. She pulled her shawl tighter and glanced at the cowboy again. There was more to him. Much more. Something about the way he kept his back to the open plains. Something about the way his hands stayed close to the side of his coat. Something about the way he seemed to be listening for sounds she couldn't hear. It felt like he wasn't just helping her. It felt like he was protecting her. But from what? And why? She didn't ask. Not yet. The cowboy tightened the last piece of wood and stood up, wiping the sweat and dust from his brow as the sky turned deep orange. He didn't smile. Didn't relax. Instead, he looked at the road behind him one more time, his expression turning tense. She followed his gaze, trying to see what he saw. Nothing. Just empty land. But the cowboy's voice lowered as he whispered, almost to himself, "They're getting close." She froze. "Who?" she asked. He turned toward her slowly, his eyes dark with a truth he could no longer hide. "The ones I've been running from," he said. "And the ones who've been looking for you?" Before she could speak, a faint, distant sound echoed across the plains. Footsteps, hooves, getting closer, and the night hadn't even begun yet. The wind grew colder as the faint echo of hooves drifted through the air, soft at first, almost easy to ignore, but the cowboy's sharp eyes and rigid posture made it clear that he heard something she couldn't. She felt her heartbeat rise slowly, the same way fear creeps in when you realize you might not be as alone as you thought. The open plains suddenly felt wider, emptier, and far too quiet. The cowboy didn't move at first. He stayed still, listening. The orange glow of the sunset brushed against his face, and in that light she noticed something she had missed before: a small scar along his jaw. Old but deep, like it carried a story he never cared to share. His hand rested near the side of his coat again, not aggressively, but in a way that told her he was preparing for something. She wanted to ask more, to understand what danger was coming and why he mentioned someone might be looking for her, but before she could say a word, he stepped forward and lowered his voice. How long have you been on this road?" he asked. "And don't tell me just the miles. I need the truth." The question caught her off guard. She took a breath and looked down at the ground. She wasn't expecting anyone to notice her situation, much less demand answers. But something about his tone, firm but not rude, made her feel like hiding the truth wouldn't help them now. "I left my town weeks ago," she said quietly. "I didn't have much choice." The cowboy waited. It was clear he knew she wasn't finished. She swallowed and continued. "My husband passed last winter. It was sudden. And people talked. Too much. Some said I couldn't keep the house alone. Others said I shouldn't stay there without family. The place never felt the same after he was gone." Her voice cracked slightly, a pain she tried to hide behind strength. She turned away to breathe. The cowboy's expression softened, but only for a moment. Then he nodded slowly, like her story answered part of something he already suspected. "Leaving home is never easy," he said, "especially when you didn't plan to go." She looked at him again. "What about you? How long have you been running?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes moved toward the horizon again, that same haunted look drifting into his expression. He finally spoke in a low voice, long enough to know trouble doesn't stay behind for long. His words carried weight, enough for her to feel the truth in them. The cowboy wasn't just wandering, he wasn't just passing by. He was escaping something dangerous, something persistent, something that didn't stop following him. He brushed dirt off his gloves and stepped closer to the wagon. "You said people talked after your husband passed? Did they accuse anyone? Or did anything strange happen before you left?" She hesitated. She hadn't told anyone this, not even herself fully. It was a knot in her memory she tried to pretend didn't exist. "There was a man," she said slowly. "He came to our door a few times, always at odd hours. Said he needed help, said he knew my husband, but my husband never mentioned him." What did he look like?" the cowboy asked. Tall, rough voice, eyes that didn't blink enough. He wore a long brown coat. I still remember the way he stood at the door, like he wasn't sure whether he wanted to come in or take something with him. The cowboy's jaw tightened. "Did he come back after your husband passed?" Asterisk, yes, she whispered. Once I didn't answer the door. The next morning I found footprints all around the house. Asterisk, the cowboy let out a slow breath, his eyes narrowing like he was piecing together something that had been bothering him for a long time. Asterisk, he's the reason you're out here, isn't he? He asked. Asterisk, she nodded. I didn't feel safe. I thought maybe if I left quietly, he wouldn't find me. Asterisk, the cowboy didn't speak for several seconds. Then he stepped away from the wagon and looked out into the darkening plains. Asterisk, you were right to leave, he said, but he's still coming. Asterisk, her stomach dropped. How do you know? Asterisk, the cowboy turned to her with a tired, heavy expression. Because the man you described, he's been following me too. Asterisk, the silence between them grew thick. She felt her breath catch in her chest. The idea that two strangers could be tied together by the same shadow felt unreal, but the cowboy's seriousness made it impossible to deny. Asterisk, why would he follow you? She asked. Asterisk, the cowboy looked down, kicked a stone lightly, and answered in a voice that felt almost painful for him to say. Asterisk, because I once knew something he didn't want anyone to know. Something about your husband. Asterisk, her mind froze. A strange disbelief mixed with shock and fear. She wanted to ask, but her voice refused to come out. How could this cowboy, a man she'd never met before, know anything about her husband? Asterisk, he seemed to notice her confusion and raised a hand slightly. Not to stop her, but to show he wasn't hiding the truth now. Asterisk, I met your husband 3 years ago, he said softly, out near the west border, close to the mining trails. He wasn't the kind of man who wandered far, was he? Asterisk, no, she said. He never traveled much. Asterisk, that's what worried me, the cowboy replied, because he wasn't traveling by choice. He was taken there. Asterisk, she stepped back, her breath catching. Her husband taken. Asterisk, the cowboy continued, though his voice lowered. There was a group working out there, men who didn't want their business seen. Your husband stumbled into something he shouldn't have. They kept him quiet. Until he escaped. Asterisk, her heart felt like it dropped straight to the ground. Her husband never told her anything like this. Never even hinted he had faced danger. Asterisk, why didn't he tell me? She whispered. Asterisk, the cowboy shook his head. He was trying to protect you. But he also knew someone would come looking for him again. And for you? Asterisk, her hands trembled by her sides. Everything she thought she knew about her husband suddenly bent and twisted, forming a picture she couldn't recognize. Asterisk, how do you know all this? She asked with a shaky voice. Asterisk, because I was there the night he escaped, the cowboy said. I was the one who found him on the trail, hurt, tired, barely able to speak. He didn't tell me everything, but he said one thing. They'll go after her if they can't find me. Asterisk, a chill washed through her body. She felt the weight of every word, heavy like the dust settling around her feet. Asterisk, but why are they after you? She whispered. Asterisk, the cowboy took a slow breath. Because I helped him. And because I know what they were doing out there. Things they don't want exposed. Asterisk, night crept in fully now, painting the sky in deep blues. The distant sound of hooves grew a little louder. Not rushing, not galloping, but steady. Patient. Asterisk, the cowboy turned fully toward her now, his voice serious and low. We don't have long, and when they reach us, they're not coming to talk. Asterisk, her heartbeat thudded loudly in her ears. She felt the world shift around her. Her broken wagon, her lost home, her husband's secrets. This cowboy's hidden past. Everything was connected. Everything was leading to this moment. Asterisk, she looked at him. Fear mixing with something unexpected dash trust. Asterisk, what do we do now? She asked. The cowboy stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. We get you safe. But first. He paused, scanning the empty plains once more. There's something I haven't told you yet. Something your husband wanted you to know? Asterisk, she stared at him, breath caught. What is it? The cowboy opened his mouth to answer, but the sound of hooves suddenly thundered louder. To close now, to ignore, the cowboy stiffened. They found us. Asterisk, and the night, as dark and silent as it was, felt like it was holding its breath for what would happen next. Asterisk. The sound of hooves rolled across the open land like a warning from the night itself. Slow, steady, determined. The cowboy's posture changed instantly. He didn't panic, didn't raise his voice, but his entire body sharpened, like someone who had lived through danger enough times to recognize its footsteps before it showed its face. Asterisk, she felt her breath tighten. The fading light made everything harder to see, but the cowboy's sharp gaze remained fixed on the horizon, watching for shapes that hadn't appeared yet. She clutched her shawl closer, wishing the cold wind wasn't shaking her hands as much as fear was. The broken wagon behind her seemed smaller now, almost useless. like the last fragile piece of safety she thought she had. Asterisk, listen carefully, the cowboy said quietly. When they arrive, they're not looking for a conversation. They're looking for answers, and they think I'm the one holding them. Asterisk, she swallowed hard. What are they after? Asterisk, information, he said. Something your husband told me before he died? Asterisk, the words hit her hard again, but she tried to keep her voice steady. What did he tell you? Asterisk, the cowboy looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of regret and urgency. A location? Something hidden. Something valuable enough that they're willing to hunt anyone who knows about it. Asterisk, the wind picked up, pushing dust around their feet as the hooves grew clearer. She tried to process everything the cowboys passed. Her husband's secrets. The danger tying their lives together like threads in a net. She hadn't known she was standing in. Asterisk. What kind of location? She asked. Asterisk, I don't know exactly, he said. Your husband didn't make it long after I found him, but he kept repeating one thing. If anything happens, she must know. Asterisk, she stared at him. Know what? Asterisk, he hesitated, then spoke softly. That he left something behind for you? Asterisk, her heart pounded. She tried to make sense of it, tried to reach back into her memory for something her husband might have hinted at. A final message, a strange comment, anything. But she found nothing. Asterisk, before she could speak again. The cowboy gently grabbed her arm, not harshly, but firmly enough to pull her attention back to the moment. They're close, and once they're here, we won't get another chance to prepare. Asterisk, she nodded, even though her legs felt unsteady. Her mind raced through possibilities of hiding, running, trying to reason, but none of those options felt useful. Not with strangers who traveled at night, who searched for people in silence, who left fear buried in the land like footprints no wind could erase. Asterisk. The cowboy led her to the side of the wagon where shadows hid them better. Stay low, he whispered. Let me speak first. You can't face them alone, she whispered back. He looked at her, an unexpected softness, settling briefly in his eyes. I've been facing them alone for too long. Asterisk, but before she could argue, he slipped to the front of the wagon, positioning himself between her and the road. She listened to the rhythm of hooves as they approached 3 horses. Maybe 4. Each step confident. Each rider knowing exactly where they were going. Asterisk. Minutes felt like hours until 3 dark figures finally rose from the horizon, cutting shapes against the deep blue sky. They stopped a short distance away, their horses snorting softly in the cold air. Asterisk. The cowboy didn't move, didn't flinch. His calmness almost felt unreal, but she sensed something beneath the anger he'd been pushing down for years. Guilt he never fully admitted, and fear he refused to show. Asterisk, one of the men spoke, his voice low but sharp enough to carry through the wind. We've been looking for you. Asterisk, the cowboy's voice remained steady. I figured, you know why we're here, the man said. The cowboy didn't answer. The silence felt heavy, like the night itself was waiting. Asterisk, then, the stranger continued. Where is it? Asterisk, I don't have what you're looking for. Asterisk, that's not what we heard. Asterisk, behind the wagon, she pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from gasping. Every sound, every word felt dangerous. She tried to peek around the wooden boards quietly, watching the silhouettes of the 3 riders. They wore long coats, hats pulled low, faces hidden in shadows, but their posture said everything. They were not simple travelers. They were men with a mission. And her wagon, the cowboy? And even the road felt like pieces of a trap they set long ago. Asterisk, your friend talked before he died, the first man said. He told us someone helped him escape. Someone who knows where he hid it? Asterisk. The cowboy breathed out slowly. He didn't tell me anything. Asterisk, the man's voice hardened. Then why are you running? Asterisk, she watched the cowboy's jaw tighten just slightly. She could tell he was holding himself back from saying something he might regret. Asterisk, one of the other riders leaned forward. We don't need patience. We only need answers. Asterisk, the cowboy shook his head. You're not getting anything from me. Asterisk, the man on the left shifted in his saddle. We can always look around. Maybe the woman traveling with you knows something. Her heart froze. The cowboy's voice darkened quickly. She's got nothing to do with this. Asterisk, that's not what we heard either, the man replied calmly. A widow leaves town suddenly. A stranger disappears the same night, and you happen to be riding the same direction? Asterisk, her breath caught in her chest. She felt exposed even though she was hidden. Asterisk, she didn't know anything, the cowboy said. And if you go near her, asterisk, what? The man snapped. You'll stop us. You think standing on this road makes you stronger than us? Asterisk, the tension thickened as one of the riders dismounted and began walking toward the wagon. His boots crunched quietly in the grass, each step colder than the last. She pulled back further, hiding behind a stack of supplies, her fingers gripping the rough wood so tightly it hurt. Asterisk, the cowboy stepped forward sharply. She's not part of this. Asterisk, she is, if she's seen you, the man replied, still walking. Asterisk, the cowboy's voice finally cracked with frustration. You're chasing ghosts. He didn't leave anything. Whatever you're searching for, it's not here. Asterisk, the stranger stopped only a few feet away from the wagon's edge. Then you won't mind if we look. Asterisk, the cowboy moved forward again, blocking his path. For a moment, it felt like time froze. The cold wind pressed against the wagon, and she could hear her heartbeat thudding in her ears. Asterisk, the main rider spoke again. We don't want trouble, but we can't leave without answers. Asterisk, the cowboy's voice, lowered, steady and controlled. You're not getting answers tonight. Asterisk, the man on foot stared at him, breathing hard, then turned slightly. Searched the wagon. Asterisk, she felt panic shoot through her body like a wave. She scrambled silently toward the back, trying to find anything that could hide her better. But before she could move more than a few feet, a hand touched her shoulder. Asterisk, she nearly screamed until she turned and saw the cowboy's horse, standing there calmly, as if offering protection of its own, but the cowboy wasn't beside her. He was still blocking the rider with a tense silence that said he wasn't moving. Asterisk, the rider raised his voice. Move aside. No, the cowboy answered. The air tightened like a rope pulled from both ends. Asterisk, before anything else could happen. A new sound echoed through the plains, not horses, not footsteps, something deeper. Something knowing, asterisk, a low rumble from far off in the distance. Sending a shiver through the ground, asterisk, the three riders turned sharply. Scanning the horizon, asterisk, the cowboy stiffened, his eyes widening the slightest bit. Asterisk, he whispered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear from behind the wagon. Asterisk, they weren't the only ones who found us. Her breath stopped completely. The night suddenly didn't feel empty anymore. Something else was coming. Something worse. Asterisk, and the road. The wagon and the cold dark prairie were about to become the center of a storm she never saw coming. Asterisk. The air felt heavier that evening, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. The wind had gone quiet, leaving only the dry rustle of grass and the faint creak of the broken wagon wheel behind them. Clara stood close to the small fire Daniel had built, her arms wrapped around herself. The flames lit half her face while the other half stayed in shadow, just like her life, torn between what she showed and what she refused to share. Daniel quietly watched her, as if every flicker of the fire revealed another piece of a puzzle he was trying to solve. Asterisk. She hadn't spoken much since he returned from checking the trail again. Her silence wasn't cold. It was thoughtful, almost protective. Daniel wondered what she was thinking, whether she wanted him here, whether she trusted him, whether she sensed the secret he carried. Like a weight wrapped around his ribs. He had helped many travelers before, but something about Clara felt different. She wasn't simply a woman with a broken wagon. She was someone running from something, or someone, and Daniel could feel it more strongly with every passing moment. Asterisk. Clara finally looked up at him. The light shifted, revealing her eyes, which carried something deeper than fear. It was strength, quiet, stubborn, buried under exhaustion. Thank you, she said softly, for helping me today. Her voice trembled just enough for Daniel to know she wasn't used to relying on anyone. Asterisk. You don't need to thank me, he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. Anyone would have stopped. Asterisk. Clara gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. Not everyone stops anymore. Not out here. Asterisk. Daniel knew she was right. This land had changed. People traveled with suspicion, not kindness. And with the recent trouble near the river town's stolen cattle, burned farms, missing families, fear had spread faster than dust on the trail. But he didn't tell her that. Not yet. Because the truth behind those events was tangled directly with his secret, and he wasn't ready for her to know how close danger actually was. Asterisk. Clara poked at the fire, watching sparks rise and then fade. I didn't plan to travel alone, she whispered. Things changed. She didn't say what changed, but Daniel heard everything she didn't say. Someone left her. Someone betrayed her. Someone made her run. Asterisk. He hesitated, but kept his voice gentle. Are you heading somewhere far? Asterisk. She nodded. North? Toward the old trading road. I heard there are small towns where a person can start fresh, where people don't ask questions. Asterisk. Daniel's chest tightened. That same road? That same direction? It was where the danger was growing, where the people he'd been searching for were last seen. He almost told her to change her path, but he held back. He couldn't warn her without revealing why he knew about that danger in the first place. Asterisk. Clara took a shaky breath and continued. I just need to get there safely. Once my wagon is fixed, I'll keep moving. I don't want to slow you down. Asterisk. Daniel looked at the wagon out of the corner of his eye. Even with the tools he had, fixing it wouldn't be quick. Something wasn't right about the damage. Looked deliberate, like someone had taken a blade to the spokes. But Clara hadn't noticed, or maybe she had. and she was pretending she hadn't. Asterisk, before he could say anything, a sharp howl echoed in the distance. Clara flinched, her hand tightening around the blanket around her shoulders. Asterisk, coyotes, Daniel said calmly, though he listened a little too closely to be fully relaxed. They won't come near the fire. Asterisk, Clara nodded, but she still edged a little closer to him, almost unconsciously. Daniel noticed, and something inside him shifted an instinct, protective and quietly fierce. But he forced himself to stay still. He couldn't let emotion cloud judgment. Not when her safety depended on him staying sharp. Asterisk, the fire dimmed slightly as the wind picked up again. The night grew colder, darker, and heavier with unspoken fears. Asterisk, Clara looked at the stars, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you ever feel like someone is watching you, even when you can't see anyone? Asterisk, Daniel's pulse kicked hard. He studied her face. She wasn't guessing. She was remembering something recent. Asterisk, why do you ask? He said, keeping his tone careful. Asterisk, Clara swallowed. Because for the past 2 days, it's felt like someone has been following me. I don't know who. I never saw them, but I felt it. Every time I stopped, I felt eyes on me. And today, right before the wagon broke, I heard footsteps. Asterisk, Daniel's jaw tightened. He felt the fire's heat, but inside, a cold warning spread through him. He had been right. Someone had tampered with her wagon. Someone wanted her stranded. Asterisk, Clara, he said quietly. Did you ever think maybe you weren't imagining it? Asterisk, she looked at him sharply, fear returning to her eyes. Asterisk, Daniel wanted to tell her everything that he knew who was out on these trails. That he'd been tracking them for weeks, that they were dangerous, that he feared they had noticed Clara traveling alone, but if he told her too soon, she might panic. And panic led to mistakes. Asterisk, instead, he stood up slowly and stepped away from the fire, scanning the dark edges of the trees. The silence felt wrong, too still, too focused, as if the night itself was leaning closer. Asterisk, Clara rose too, her voice trembling. Daniel, do you see something? Asterisk, he didn't answer. Not yet, because something in the distance, a flicker of movement, too low to be an animal, made his heartbeat start to pound harder. Asterisk, he turned back toward her, his expression shifting, the calmness fading into something more alert. Asterisk, Clara, he said softly, stay close to the fire, and don't look scared. Asterisk, her breath hitched. Why? What's happening? Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. Because someone out there is watching us right now? Asterisk, the fire crackled louder between them, the sparks flying up like warnings. Asterisk, Clara's face went pale, her hand pressing against her chest. The air around them thickened, every shadow suddenly sharper, every sound stretched thin with tension. Asterisk, Daniel reached slowly for his coat, where he kept the one thing he hoped he wouldn't need tonight. Asterisk, just as he touched it, a twig snapped in the darkness. Clara gasped. Daniel's eyes locked on the trees. Asterisk. And the night stopped breathing altogether. The snap of the twig echoed again, louder this time, closer. Daniel's hand tightened around the hilt of the knife he carried at his belt. Though his body stayed calm, controlled, his eyes darted from shadow to shadow, searching for any sign of movement. Clara pressed herself closer to the fire, trembling but trying not to make a sound. Every instinct told Daniel that something had changed, that whoever or whatever was out there, they weren't just scouts or travelers. They were hunting. And now, they knew exactly where the firelight came from. Asterisk, then he saw it. A figure emerging from the darkness, tall, wrapped in a long coat that seemed to blend into the night. But it wasn't one of the riders from earlier. This figure moved differently, carefully, like someone who knew the terrain far better than any stranger should. Daniel froze for a fraction of a second. His mind raced. Whoever this was, they weren't here by accident. They were here for Clara. Asterisk. The figure stopped at the edge of the firelight. The hooded face tilted upward slightly, and Daniel could see a glint of steel at the belt. Not a weapon drawn yet, but the weight of it, the readiness, made his stomach knot. And then he noticed something that made his pulse spike. A mark on the coat. A subtle stitching that matched the description of the same group his husband had run from, the ones responsible for forcing him to flee. For hiding secrets Daniel had only partially uncovered. Asterisk, Clara gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hands. Who is that? She whispered. Asterisk, Daniel's voice dropped lower. I don't know. But they're not just here for me anymore. Asterisk, the figure stepped closer, and the wind shifted, carrying a faint voice. Looking for someone, it said, calm, almost amused, or something. Asterisk, Daniel's mind raced. Could this be one of the men who'd tampered with the wagon, or someone else entirely? And why was this presence so familiar? There was a tension in the air he couldn't ignore, the kind that only comes when danger is closer than you think. Asterisk, suddenly, a Another movement came from behind the wagon. Clara stiffened. Daniel whirled, knife raised, only to find a second shadow slipping from the darkness. It was a woman this time, and she moved with a fluid, almost deliberate grace, carrying nothing but a small satchel and eyes that scanned every inch of the firelight. Daniel's mind flashed to a thought he hadn't dared to consider. This wasn't just a random encounter. These people knew more about Clara's journey than she did herself. Daniel. Clara's voice trembled. Why do I feel like I've seen them before? He froze at her words. That didn't make sense. She hadn't traveled this far west, not before, and yet, the way she said it, the recognition in her voice, made him question everything. Whoever these two were, they weren't strangers. Not entirely. The first figure male spoke again. We've been waiting. We know what you carry, and we know who taught you to hide it. Daniel's eyes narrowed. His mind raced through the possibilities. Someone had been tracking him. Yes, but someone had been tracking Clara too. Someone who understood the connection between them. Someone who knew what her husband had left behind. The stakes just got higher. The second figure stepped closer, revealing her face partially in the firelight, and Daniel's heart stopped for a moment, not because he recognized her, but because the faint scar across her cheek matched a memory he had long tried to bury. A memory of betrayal of someone thought lost, and someone who had once been trusted. You've been lying to her, the woman said, her voice low, almost a whisper. She deserves to know the truth. Daniel's hands stilled. Lies, truth. He had been protecting Clara, keeping secrets to ensure her safety, but the presence of these two one woman introduced a complication he hadn't anticipated. Their knowledge of his past, of her husband, of the hidden messages, it meant that the threads tying their lives together were unraveling. And fast. Clara stepped slightly forward, her voice firm but wary. What truth? What are you talking about? The man chuckled, a sound that made Daniel's teeth clench. The kind of truth that changes everything. That explains why your husband ran, why the cowboy you trust carries the burden he does, and why you're in more danger than you realize. Daniel felt a cold surge of dread. He glanced at Clara, then back at the two figures. The night had grown colder, darker, the prairie stretching endlessly around them, but the shadows now felt alive, pressing in, holding secrets he hadn't shared, threats he hadn't revealed. You've been following me, Daniel said finally, his voice sharp. Why now? The woman smiled faintly. Because the time has come for her to know. Because the men you've been hiding from, they're not the only ones searching. Daniel's eyes widened. The words hit harder than he expected. Not just the old threats, but new, unpredictable ones. Forces he hadn't considered, secrets long buried, were surfacing now. And with Clara here, vulnerable and trusting, the danger wasn't just his, anymore it was hers too. Clara's eyes darted between Daniel and the two strangers. You know about my husband. About what happened? The man nodded. And about what he left behind? You've been running thinking you were safe. But nothing has ever been that simple, has it? The wind picked up suddenly, sending dust swirling around them, making shadows dance across faces, hiding intentions, revealing nothing. Daniel took a step closer to Clara, instinctively shielding her with his body. Every fiber of him screamed that tonight, something significant was about to happen. Something that would force them to confront the truths they'd both been avoiding. You don't understand, Daniel said, his voice tense, low, protective. We don't have time for secrets. If you're here, it's already too late. They're coming. The woman's eyes glinted. That's the point. You've been preparing for them. But what you didn't know is that there's another hand guiding the game. Another force waiting to take what belongs to her and to you. Clara swallowed hard, her breath quickening. She glanced at Daniel, then back at the two strangers. The firelight trembled across their faces, illuminating uncertainty, fear, and the weight of secrets too long hidden. Daniel felt a tight knot in his stomach. His instincts screamed danger, yet something in the woman's tone hinted at knowledge he couldn't ignore. And for the first time, he realized that this night, this road, this wagon, and the prairie itself was no longer just about survival. It was about uncovering layers of deceit, protecting a woman he had just begun to trust, and facing a truth that could change everything they believed about the past and the future. The hooves in the distance grew louder again, but now they weren't alone. Daniel's eyes shifted toward the horizon, where more shapes began to emerge, eiters silhouetted against the night sky, riding faster than before. Their intentions clear, their pursuit relentless. And in that moment, as the wind whipped around them and shadows closed in, Daniel knew that the night had only just begun and that the danger, the secrets, and the past would collide in ways none of them could anticipate. Asterisk Clara gripped his arm tightly, whispering, "What do we do?" Asterisk Daniel looked at her, at the strangers, and at the approaching threat. His jaw tightened. "We survive," he said, "and we face whatever comes next. Together?" Asterisk, but even as he spoke, a shiver ran down his spine, because out there beyond the firelight, the real danger was closer than they imagined on. The night had not yet revealed all of its secrets. Asterisk. The sound of hooves thundered across the prairie, closer now, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Daniel crouched low, pulling Clara behind the wagon as shadows stretched and twisted in the flickering firelight. The two strangers who had appeared from the darkness stood ready, their eyes scanning alert. Daniel's heart raced, but his hands were steady. This was the moment every instinct had prepared him for. Tonight, the night of fear, secrets, and relentless pursuit, would either end in survival or in disaster. Asterisk, the first rider appeared over the rise, a silhouette against the deep blue of the night sky, then another, then another. Daniel's mind calculated. They were surrounded, but not completely. The firelight created an advantage light and heat that forced their pursuers to hesitate. He whispered to Clara, "Stay low, but don't move too far from me. Trust me," she nodded, gripping his arm tightly, her knuckles white. Asterisk, the strangers, the man and woman who had revealed the second twist, moved deliberately. Flanking him, knowing as much about his skills as he did about theirs, Daniel's hand brushed the knife at his belt. But he knew the fight wasn't just physical, it was mental. The men coming were desperate for answers. Yes, but so was he. Answers about her husband, about what he left behind, about why they were all caught in this web of danger and secrets. Asterisk now. The man barked suddenly, stepping forward, revealing a hidden pistol under his coat. Daniel reacted instantly, drawing his own knife in one smooth motion. But before he could strike, the woman lunged toward Clara, who stumbled slightly. Asterisk Clara, Daniel shouted, charging between them. The air was thick with tension. Sparks flew as the first rider's horse neighed, the others slowed, unsure of the sudden chaos erupting around the firelight. Daniel's strength and precision met desperation head-on. Every move was calculated, a dance between survival and trust. He blocked the woman just as she tried to reach Clara, forcing her back into the shadows. Asterisk, Clara's eyes widened. "Daniel," she cried, "what do we do?" Asterisk, "We fight," he said, voice low but firm, "and we survive." Asterisk, the chaos erupted fully. The strangers pressed closer, the riders edging nearer, and for a moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to nothing but the circle of fire and the shadows creeping in. Daniel's mind raced through everything he knew, the hidden messages from her husband, the secrets the strangers had been keeping, and the dangers waiting further down the road. Asterisk then, amid the tension, the woman dropped her mask of aggression and spoke clearly. "Daniel, stop. You don't understand. He wanted me to protect her if anything happened." Asterisk Daniel froze, his grip tightening around his knife. "Protect her?" he demanded. Asterisk. "Yes," she said, stepping back. "All this time, I've been tracking them too. I know who's coming. I know why they're after her." Asterisk, the revelation hit Daniel like a sudden gust of wind. Not all of this was an attack, a warning, and the man standing beside her, the one who had been speaking the harshest words, lowered his guns slowly. "We're not her enemies," he admitted, "but you have to trust us. What's coming is bigger than any of us alone." Asterisk, Daniel's eyes flicked to Clara, whose fear mixed with confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. Asterisk, the woman glanced at the horizon. There, just beyond the edge of the firelight, movement began again. But this time, it wasn't individual riders. It was a larger group, horses kicking up dust, shadows stretching, armed men moving with intent. Daniel realized they weren't just being pursued. They were being hunted for something they barely understood. Asterisk, Clara's voice was barely audible. Is it about my husband?" Asterisk, "Yes," Daniel said, taking a deep breath. "And what he left behind." Asterisk, the strangers stepped closer. "He hid something valuable," the man said quietly. "Something they'll kill to get. But it's not just gold or silver, it's information. Secrets that could ruin powerful men. That's why your husband disappeared. That's why Daniel tried to protect you. That's why we've all been here." Asterisk, Clara's eyes widened. The stakes were higher than she had imagined. Daniel felt the heat of the fire at his back, the cold night on his face, the pressure of the unknown pressing in. They had seconds, maybe less, before the group reached them. Asterisk, Daniel acted. Using the wagon for cover, he directed Clara and the strangers to take positions, setting a defensive line in the open prairie. The first group of riders approached faster, but the firelight blinded them momentarily. Daniel's mind calculated each step, each move could save them, or it could cost lives. Asterisk, the clash came suddenly. Horses neighed, guns fired into the air. shadows moved with deadly precision. Daniel's knife flashed as he intercepted an attacker, the metal ringing sharply. Clara ducked behind him, clutching the fire poker to defend herself. The two strangers coordinated quickly, revealing a skill and familiarity with danger Daniel hadn't expected. Then came the final twist. Amid the chaos, one of the riders shouted, "Stop! Don't touch her," and Daniel's head snapped toward the sound. The rider wasn't attacking, he was trying to protect her. Daniel froze. "Who are you?" he yelled over the noise. The rider pulled off his hat, revealing a face Clara instantly recognized. "I'm someone your husband trusted. I came to make sure you were safe, not to harm you." Clara gasped. You're his brother." Yes, he confirmed. "And we don't have much time. They were never after the wagon or the fire, they were after you and what your husband left hidden. But now it's all coming together. You must leave this place tonight." Daniel lowered his knife slowly, his body still tense. The group of attackers had been caught between fear and confusion, their plans unraveling. The strangers, Daniel and Clara, formed a tight circle, realizing that surviving the night meant working together. As the first rays of dawn began to touch the horizon, the immediate danger faded, leaving them panting, exhausted, but alive. Clara's hands shook, her face pale. "Is it over?" she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. The danger isn't gone. It's just changed. And there's one more thing you need to know." Clara looked at him, waiting. Daniel turned to the stranger who had revealed herself earlier. "Tell her?" She stepped forward, her eyes serious. "Your husband didn't just hide secrets. He left you something else. Something he wanted you to find only when you were ready. And it's not here." Clara's brow furrowed. "Not here? Where?" The woman smiled faintly, almost sadly. "That's the twist. He left it somewhere only he knew, and now, only the two of you can uncover it. But there's a reason it's hidden. And the ones who chased you tonight, they will keep searching. They won't stop until they find it. So, even though you survived this night, the story, it's far from over." Daniel felt the weight of her words. Clara looked at him, her hands trembling, eyes wide, both afraid and determined. The prairie stretched endlessly behind them, the sun rising slowly, painting the land in gold and shadow. They had survived, but the real journey, the real danger, and the secrets waiting in the distance were only beginning to unfold. And in that moment, the wind carried a whisper across the empty land, chilling them both to the bone. Something else was out there, watching, waiting, and the next chapter of their story would be far more dangerous than tonight. The sunrise cast long golden streaks across the prairie, turning the land into a mixture of light and shadow. Clara sat on the edge of the repaired wagon, her hands resting on her knees, trying to steady her racing heartbeat. The night had been long, filled with fear, secrets, and danger, but it was over for now. Daniel stood a few steps away, scanning the horizon, alert but calmer than before. The strangers who had revealed the hidden truths lingered near the fire, keeping a cautious watch as the wind carried faint whispers across the open land. Clara finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I can't believe it. Everything my husband left behind, everything I didn't know, and all this danger, it was for me." Daniel approached and sat beside her, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Your husband trusted you more than anyone. He knew you were strong enough to handle it, even if he didn't think you'd ever have to. But the people chasing you? They don't know that. That's why tonight was so dangerous." Clara took a deep breath, letting the tension in her body ease slightly. "I kept thinking I was alone, that no one would ever understand what happened, but you've been here protecting me even when you didn't have to." Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting both relief and lingering concern. "We all need someone sometimes. Tonight proved that. You don't have to carry your past alone anymore." The woman who had been helping them stepped forward, her expression softening. "Your husband left more than secrets. He left instructions, messages, things he wanted you to find when the time was right. But he also trusted Daniel and me to make sure you were safe until you were ready." Clara looked at the woman, curiosity mixed with gratitude. "How? How do I find it?" "You don't have to do it tonight," Daniel said. "The most important thing is that you survived and that you know the truth. The rest, the discovery of what he left, will come when you're ready, and you won't have to do it alone." For the first time in days, Clara felt a sense of calm. The weight of fear and uncertainty that had been pressing down on her began to lift, replaced by hope. She glanced around at the prairie, the repaired wagon, and the early morning light. Everything that had felt so vast, lonely, and dangerous just hours ago now seemed a little smaller, a little more manageable. Asterisk Daniel rose and stretched his arms, glancing back at the horizon one last time. They won't be coming back tonight, he said. The ones chasing you? They were confused, caught off guard. But we need to move carefully. The prairie is wide, but danger still exists out there. Knowledge and preparation are your best protection. Asterisk Clara nodded, a quiet determination settling in her expression. Then I'll keep going. I'll follow the path my husband wanted me to take, and I'll be ready for whatever comes next. Asterisk the strangers, now allies rather than threats, gathered around. The man spoke, his voice steady. You've learned the truth tonight, but remember this. Survival isn't just about hiding or running. It's about understanding the people you trust, the choices you make, and the lessons from those who came before you. Your husband knew that, and he left you prepared in ways you don't fully see yet. Asterisk Clara looked at Daniel, then at the strangers, feeling a mix of gratitude and newfound strength. I've spent so long feeling helpless, she said softly, but tonight, I've learned I can face what's coming even if I don't know all the answers. Asterisk Daniel nodded. And you won't have to. You'll have guidance, allies, and the courage to move forward. You survived the night, and that's proof enough that you're stronger than you realize. Asterisk the prairie was quiet now except for the soft rustle of the grass in the early morning breeze. Clara felt the warmth of the sun on her face and the reassurance of Daniel's presence beside her. The broken wagon, now repaired, symbolized more than just a journey. Continued it was a reminder of resilience, trust, and hope. Asterisk as they prepared to leave. Daniel handed Clara a small bundle her husband had left behind for her. She opened it slowly, revealing a few personal items, letters, and a map marked with notes. Her heart swelled with emotion. Each item was a reminder of love, foresight, and the strength he had always believed she possessed. Asterisk Clara looked at Daniel, tears in her eyes. I understand now. He left me not just possessions but trust, courage, and faith in myself. Asterisk Daniel smiled. And that's more powerful than anything they were chasing. That's why you survived, why you're here, and why you'll be able to face what comes next. Asterisk as they began their journey along the prairie trail, the horizon stretched endlessly, golden with the promise of a new day. The threats of the past lingered, but Clara felt ready for the challenges ahead. She was no longer just a widow running from shadows. She was a woman carrying the strength, knowledge, and courage to navigate whatever lay before her. Asterisk the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the memory of the night they had survived. The secrets revealed and the bond forged between allies. Clara and Daniel rode side by side, not just for survival, but with the understanding that they were stronger together, ready to uncover the truths left behind by the past, and prepared to face the uncertainties of the future. Asterisk and though the prairie remained vast and the world uncertain, Clara no longer felt powerless. She had survived the night, uncovered the truth, and learned that courage, trust, and resilience were the keys to moving forward. The journey would continue, but she knew now that she could face it with hope, determination, and the guidance of those who cared. Asterisk the shadows of the night faded completely, leaving light, clarity, and a sense of peace. The broken wagon was repaired, the threats had been survived, and the secrets of the past were no longer hidden. Clara's journey, once defined by fear and uncertainty, now held purpose, strength, and the promise of a future she could face with courage. Asterisk, and as the prairie stretched endlessly around them, Clara realized something profound. Survival wasn't just about escaping danger, it was about embracing the journey, trusting the people who stood by her, and finding the strength within herself to face whatever came next. Asterisk the road ahead was still long, and challenges would arise, but Clara knew that she was no longer running blindly. She carried the wisdom, courage, and legacy of her husband with her, ready to face the world not as a victim, but as someone empowered, prepared, and unafraid to step into whatever awaited beyond the horizon. Asterisk